Hello, hola, buenas noches, buenos dias, mi gente. How are y'all doing? Um, Welcome back to the channel for the folks that are here every week. Welcome to the new people who maybe just discovered the channel. Super happy that you're here. My name is Adelia Abor-Shade, aka Peaky Girl Travels the World. And this is my little part of the internet where we talk about basically how to live life on your terms. About 10 years ago, I blew up my life so that I could do exactly that. I ended up moving abroad. Uh, 8 years ago? And honestly, I haven't really looked back since. So, those are some of the things we talk about on this channel. We talk about living abroad, we talk about traveling, we talk about the financial piece of all of that. And we talk about everything else connected with helping you live the life that you want. And so, my guest today, I think if that's what you need a little bit in your life, I think my guest today is going to really connect with you and help you kind of work some things out. Thank you to everybody who is here live, and if you happen to be watching the replay, thank you as well. Um, I didn't plan things this way, but it seems as though this week we have a bit of a theme. So we are live today, May 20th. We will also be live on Thursday, May 22nd. And this week we are all talking about sabbaticals, taking a break, and the power of that. And so, without further ado, let me bring my guest today on up here. Hello, hello.
Hello, hello.
Okay, now could you introduce yourself to the people?
Yes, my name is Nyam Adadwaji, and I want to start off by saying I'm an alum of Rashida Dow's Burnout to Bliss coaching program. So I always have to shout out Rashida because I feel that she's the original sabbatical coach. And I recently launched my own sabbatical coaching practice. And through my practice, I partner with midlife corporate and tech professionals to heal from career grief, to really reclaim their identities and their lives from corporate America through the avenue of taking intentional career breaks. So I'm excited to chat with you tonight on that topic.
Okay. Well, we love Rashida Dow over here and fully and wholly support the idea of Black women going from burnout to bliss and taking a career break. Now, what made you sign up for Rashida's program?
Yes, yes. And before I dive into the right before moment, I'm going to go a little bit back. So just kind of give some context on how I got to the moment where I signed up for that program. So in terms of my story, I have always been kind of a sensitive, creative, artsy, girly. When I graduated from college, I thought I was going to go into ministry or a nonprofit. I kind of stumbled into Silicon Valley and ended up working at a startup. Which you don't know about Silicon Valley, it's a pretty, I mean, it's definitely male dominated and it's a pretty like aggressive industry. So I was definitely kind of a fish out of water there. And I really found myself, I found myself very capable, kind of was thrown into the deep end. But I also, unfortunately, that was my first experience of burnout in that first job in Silicon Valley when I was 23, where working super long hours. Um,
Burnout at 23? Oh my gosh.
yes, yes. I mean, the story I always think of is that this was near the end of my time there. I'd come into the office one day and I just sat there staring at the computer screen. I couldn't process, I couldn't think, and I just started bawling. And my coworker that was next to me just said, "Yeah, I'm just go home." just go home. So that unfortunately was the tenure and start of my professional career. So I had kind of multiple cycles of being in these really intense tech or corporate jobs, burning out, needing to take a break. I often, actually, for most of my career, I've left jobs before I had another one lined up because I was just so taxed, crying in bathroom stalls, crying in front of colleagues. So this was really the state of my career. And so when we get to 2021, uh, which of course we're all in the pandemic, by that point, I had learned and grown a lot in terms of my own self advocacy. So I was at a point where at my job, was advocating for myself. I was saying, hey, here's what, I work as a product manager. And so I'd said, hey, here's what I need. Here's what my team needs in order for us to do our best work. But even with that, I found myself again in this situation where I was stressed, I was stretched, I was taxed, I was burned out. And I remember thinking so clearly, is my life just going to be one burnout cycle after another until I die? And that's when I came across Rashida, and I think I found the 12 days of career breaks. I think that she and Stephanie had done. I binged all of that. And that was really that really gave me the imagination for like, okay, I can do this too. And just to kind of mark the time. So I shared that first story from 23. I think I was like 35 or 36 when I was at that job in 2021 and when I found Rashida's program.
I think it is very interesting that you were able to use the language of burnout because I don't know that, like, somebody just asked me today about when I left teaching back in 2016. And I don't know until today when they asked me that question if I had really ever identified it as burnout. Because I think so much of how we are conditioned and what we are taught to expect out of careers, like because did you have a moment when you thought, like, oh, it's this job, it's this employer, that if I just get to the right environment. So I guess I am surprised that you were able to call a spade and be like, no, these people are burning me out. That is where I am in life. I'm proud that you were able to put that together at that age.
I mean, some of that maybe I'm saying through the articulation of my age now, because what I'll say when I was 23, what I experienced was deep anxiety. I was anxious all the time. I remember also just being depressed, just being so stretched. And I remember when I did finally leave that job, I left the job without another one lined up. But I remember having this feeling of like I've never been in an abusive relationship, but that's how it felt. Like I felt so damaged. I felt so broken. I felt so small. Um, so even if I didn't necessarily have the language of burnout, then I definitely had that experience that I was feeling, that I was like, this is, I don't know what this is, but this is deeply painful. And that's a huge part of why I have now kind of in my coaching practice, turned to this phrase of career grief, because I think, to your point and what you're saying, I think multiple people across industries have had these really painful experiences with work trauma, but a lot of times it's not necessarily validated, right? Particularly, I think in corporate environments, it's like, yeah, whatever, just push through it. Like, you're being a crybaby.
Well, I wanted to ask you about that phrase, career grief, because I've never heard it before. So, what exactly is it?
The way I describe it is the disillusionment, the pain, the experience of coming face to face with the work trauma that you've experienced, or the disappointment you've experienced, particularly in relationship to a job. Because what I found, not just for myself, but for others, and especially in the time we're in now, I hear so many people saying things like, I work in this toxic environment where we're just, they just push us to the bone, but but they're not really giving us what we need to be supported. Or folks who are, they've been grinding, they've been climbing that ladder, but then they kind of get to that next level and realize, like, oh, this is actually not what I thought it was, right? And so how can I give language to that so that people can be validated? And then the next step of, like, how can we move forward in that and heal from that?
Very interesting. And there is definitely a loss that has to be reconciled when you figure out, like, oh, this is not what I thought it was going to be, whether it's that specific job, whether it is a field that you went into, you did all this education for, and you get there and you're like, oh, this ain't it. And acknowledging it's not just, oh, this isn't it, but like all of this time, this effort, this work I put into it, all of these years,
Hmm.
it, that's definitely something that I think we would all be better if we were able to reckon with and process and what have you. um I That's just making me think about, there's quite a bit of different grief in different places in our life that we don't currently acknowledge, like
Hmm.
when women move abroad. Everybody talks about how hard it is to get rid of your stuff. And that's one of the things that I started talking about. Well, is you've got to grieve the loss of those things.
Yes.
And I don't know that people necessarily think about it in those terms, but in reality, that is what you need to do. Um, okay, so it took a little while for you to finally get to a place where you were like, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be
Yes.
more to it than this. And you enrolled in that program. You got coaching for taking a career break. Now, did that seem sort of far fetched to you, or it was like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad that she does this?
Yeah. I I mean, painting the picture at the time, I was in my late 30s, so I'd kind of already, but I think at that time, what, I mean, 10 plus years in my career, I was like sitting from a computer screen. And it was also during the pandemic, right? Which I think for a lot of people was a clarifying moment. You're seeing a lot of people losing their lives. You're seeing the brevity of life. And uh for me, I obviously it was really deeply privileged that I was working from home, and still had work. But it was still clarifying for me that it was like, okay, so is this it? Like, am I gonna be just like creating websites for these corporations so that they can make more money and just keep, grinding us all into dust, or spending all our money on things that we may not even really need. So when I found Rashida's coaching, I was like, oh, this is amazing. Like, yes. Because I had in my mind too, I remember feeling this nudge and desire inside of me of, like, before I had found her program, like, you know what I'd really want to, I just want to, like, take time off. I just want to take time off. I want to travel. But in my mind, I was like, I don't know. I feel like that's what people in their 20s do. Like, I'm 36. Like, I need to think about retirement.
Because
But then,
36 is so old, right?
well, but it was, your my peers are like, they're like, they've been married, they're settled down, they're grounded, and I'm like, can I do that? But so it was such a liberating image to find yourself and Rashida and Stephanie, and it was like, oh, okay, yeah, I can do that. So when I found her program, it was really, I mean, it really, really, truly was, the timing was impeccable, because I was so miserable, and it was like, okay, there's light at the end of the tunnel. There's hope.
Okay. And so in that program, she coached you, helped you sort of put a plan together for your sabbatical. Um, how long did it take from, joining from burnout to bliss to taking the time off from work? That's my first question.
Yeah, let's see. I think I actually joined the program February 2022. And then I think my original plan to quit my job maybe was April 2023. But as I think many people in that program have experienced, you get inspired to be like, you know
The
what,
timeline got moved up, is what I
let's move this up.
suspect.
Let's move this up. And so I ended up leaving my job in January. Oh, sorry, I got my years wrong. February 2021 is when I signed up for the program. I left my job January 2022.
Okay. And what was the plan for your sabbatical? Like, how long did you intend to stop working? What did you plan to do? Where did you plan to go?
Yeah. My plan was to take a year off because I was really at a point where I wanted to figure out how could I do my life differently. I didn't know what that specifically meant, but I knew that something, like a 2 month, 3 month, like not even 6 month. I was like, that's not gonna sort it out. And actually, it's actually quite a feat to take a year long break. Um, and so through that year all going up, kind of working with Rashida, and kind of dreaming, envisioning. My original plan was I wanted to just bop around the world. So I was like, okay, I'm just gonna go from one place to another, to another, to another. It that the time though was around when there were still like COVID restrictions and you had to like show certain things to get into certain countries, and that just seemed like more stress than I wanted. So I ended up one of the key things that I did, and which was a hard choice, but it was a necessary choice, and I think also a privileged choice, was I moved back to Atlanta, to in my parents, which is where they were based, and so I made that my home base for the year. And I ended up I bopped to Mexico. I went to Mexico City, Oaxaca City. I spent the bulk of my time in Portugal. I went to Lisbon, Porto, and Madeira Islands. I went to Spain, and I went to Ghana, which is where my dad's side of the family's from. And then I wasn't originally planning it, but I needed to like sneak in a little someplace before I started looking for work. So I went to Colombia. It was the last place I stopped.
That sounds like a lot for somebody who was supposed to just be taking the year off to not do anything.
But it was all spread out. It was all spread out
Okay.
because and to my traveling style is very. I'm a very relaxed traveler. So I'm the kind of person, I'm like, this is a place I want to go. I'll create a list of kind of these are the places and things I want to do, but I don't pressure myself. If I get somewhere and I'm like, you know what, I just want to chill in my hotel room all day, I let myself do that. So I think that was a part of the rest, and rejuvenation. I'm also a very reflective person, so a lot of these travel experiences as well was doing things like journaling, was doing things like, for me, museums and learning about kind of local places, which again kind of makes me reflect. So I was weaving in these different elements to help me process what I'd left, what I was experiencing, and then really what I was integrating from the experiences that I was having as well.
And so, did you stick to your plan of 1 year? Because often folks start the sabbatical and then the sabbatical extends and extends and extends.
I would have extended it. But the bank account said you need to replenish your your funds. But what it did um, do is that led it really led me to the FIRE movement, the Financial Independence Retire Early movement, because after having an experience of a year where I was not bound by an employer's schedule, where I could move according to my own natural rhythms, um, that was really deeply healing. And that was something I don't know if I had realized how profound of an impact that would have, but I really deeply reconnected with my body, and that was a deep avenue of me reconnecting with my intuition. And then that has has been the avenue through which I've grown and healed and gotten the courage to keep pursuing the life that I want, instead of just being like, okay, well, the sabbatical's over. Let me just go back to the grind and have this janky life.
I think it was Stephanie Perry who said that, like, time off is going to change your life. When I initially moved to Mexico City, technically it was kind of a sabbatical. It was a grown-up gap year. I was taking at least a year off from work, and I didn't know what was going to happen. But like you said, after spending that time where you call all of the shots for how you spend your time, it it is very difficult to go back to the kind of work environments you had previously. And um, definitely, like, I know this for me made me reevaluate, like, oh, how I wanted to spend my time, where I wanted to be, where I was willing to be,
Mhm.
and gave me that focus of like, okay, so when I do go back to work, this is the goal. And
Yes.
um, I've shared this before in, I don't know, one of those videos I did about fire, my personal fire journey. That's really when I upped my savings rate, because I was like, if I'm gonna go back and have a job where I got to show up somewhere every day, we're gonna make this as short
Yes.
as possible. And so let me stack as much cash as I can so I don't have to do this, because I really believe at this point I am probably unemployable in the traditional sense. And it's wild to think about that, but like I don't know that I could. I don't know that I could go back to that. Um were there any other surprises, or excuse me. Let me take that question back. What did you think was going to happen in this year off?
That's such a good question. I'm trying to remember back kind of what I thought. I know I was really excited. Um and I think some people, I'd be like, oh, like, aren't you concerned? How are you going to get job after? I'm like, I don't know.
Girl, that money will figure itself out. I ain't worried about it.
Yeah, so I don't know if I knew what was going to happen. But I did have a deep sense of anticipation. I had actually started, along 2021. I actually started doing, I journal in physical notebooks as well, but I started doing a sabbatical journal in like a Google Doc, just so it's easier to access. And so I think it started from maybe like the summer of 2021. So it was just kind of jotting down the whole journey, because the experience leading up to it. I had to endure the tomfoolery still of the job. So kind of putting that in the journal. But to your point of what you were saying in terms of your fire journey, I I was stacking that cash. I had my account. This is my sabbatical fund account. So when the paycheck was coming in, I just was whoop, 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 putting it in there. And that was, that was sustaining me through that year because I had that vision. And I remember from that journal, and I still use that digital journal now in terms of my entrepreneurship journey. There was just a deep anticipation of, I think I would say like returning to self. I had an entry in there that was like a memory of myself at 5 years old. And I used to love to swim when I was 5 years old. And it was just this image of me being free, being liberated, having fun, exploring, being curious. And that was really my longing and desire. And I think my hope for what I had for my sabbatical.
Okay, so did that happen?
It did in a lot of ways. I experienced some disappointment in that, like I said earlier, I didn't get to do my bop all around the world, no stopping. But I again, just the experience, I remember having a moment when I got into Portugal. Because I actually delayed going to Portugal because I was going to go, I think maybe in February of when I left, and then I shifted to April because I just kind of had some health things going on, and then I finally shifted it to September. And so, one, I remember just having this moment. I was on the balcony of my hotel in Porto, Portugal, and I was watching the sunset. And I had a glass of port wine. I had my feet up, relaxed, and I just felt like, oh, this is it. This is it. And I'm here, after all the endurance of the year, and the planning. And it's like, oh, I'm here. And it was also this moment of, oh, I chose this for myself and I created this for myself. And realizing like I think this might have been the first time in my adult life where I chose and created something like this for myself. So it was really it was just such a sweet time taking that year off.
Okay. Any surprises other than not really wanting to go back to work?
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if I was surprised that I, I didn't want to go back to it.
Well, I mean, because you take the sabbatical, and for most people, the expectation is, I need this break now.
Yes.
But when it is over, I will go. I feel like most of us feel like I'll go back to my life.
Yeah.
Like my intention, I had already blown up my life at that point. My intention was not to continue and do things differently.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, okay, I'll go back. But then the power of taking the sabbatical and having that time out off then changed everything.
Yeah. 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 I found that I was in a place where I guess I was in a place where I wanted to blow up my life. I was really hungry for something different. So I think for me, again, I didn't know how, but I was like, I don't know, I don't want to go back. I still am kind of working on the full exit, but I don't want to go back. Um, I think otherwise the surprise was I think what I noted about the reconnection to the body and the reconnection to intuition. Um, and so it's sort of a surprise around realizing I hadn't realized how disconnected I was from my body. I think from working in corporate, my experience has been that there's often a like push through my body's signals. Um,
Oh, no,
yeah,
when you said that and you said about like getting back your intuition, that's something I feel very strongly about because the way our society is set up, women in particular are taught from a very early age to disregard what their
yes,
body is telling them, what their intuition is telling them. And from a very early age, we're told, well, being you're being silly, blah
yeah,
blah blah. And you think about, as you add to that, working in corporate America, yeah, you're to get the job done, you're going to push through all of those internal things that are telling you, girl, don't be doing this.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, there was one job. This was kind of when I was in my late 20s. I was working at a digital agency, and I'm really not exaggerating this. I would work like 18-hour days. Like I would like get to the office at like 8 or 9. I'd be in the office all day and I'd be there till like midnight. And then I'd like go home and do it all over again, which was wild. It made no
Wild,
sense at all.
wild. Where are you now? Because from what we're hearing, your career break was a success, whether it met the expectations you had or not, or like gifted you with some new insights and things like that. Where are you now with your own career grief?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I I'll say it's been and continues to be a journey because it's been 15 years of this up and down yo-yo. And I remember, I think this was last year, there's a song by an artist called Iniko, um, called now I'm totally blanking out on the name, but the theme of the song is essentially grieving time lost. And one of the lines says, um, they really mean it when they tell you you can't get back the time once it's gone. And I remember hearing that song and I just started bawling because, even, I think, that's a couple years out from my sabbatical. There's still times where I'll feel like, oh, wow, like that was a year. I mean, that was virtually my whole adult life. And that time is gone. So I think there's still aspects of the grief there, but I've also experienced a lot of profound healing as I've reconnected to my intuition. And I think a lot of that um, has come through launching my business, because my perspective with my business is that it's not just to like form another business where then I can grind myself into dust and just be burned out and it's my own fault.
Because there are folks who do that because
Yes.
they've not really addressed, you know, the habits and the things that got them there in the first place.
Yes. And so that has been this really, I think, really profound journey of really modifying the way that I work. And because I'm still also doing kind of freelance contract work while I still ramp up my business. So, really giving myself permission to listen to my body, to slow down when I need to really be focused and grounded in kind of what is my unique vision for how I want to be of service to midlife professionals, and not focusing on, oh well, this person's doing this person's doing that. It's like, that's okay. Like, and trusting in the timing of things and trusting my intuition as I take those actions. But it's been hard. It's because it's in the water around us. Everyone's like, you gotta hustle, you gotta grind,
Yes.
you gotta move
Yes.
fast.
Now, something you just said was about, that was 15 years of your life, like your whole adult life. Something I want to say right now, because I'm pretty sure there's somebody watching this. I don't know if they're here live with us or they're going to watch this on the replay, who's thinking, well, yes, she could do that because she was in her 30s. I'm here in my 50s and I can't. I'm too old for that. It is too late for me. Nah, sis, that is not the case. I want to remind you, whether it is a sabbatical, it is, quitting a job, finding a new job, getting a new, whatever the thing is, as long as you are still here, there is time. It
Yes.
is not too late. So I don't want anybody to get caught up in how old
Hmm.
Nyam was when she did this, and oh, that don't fit for me. I'm not at that place in my career. Whether because I had a client the other day who she's 23, turning 24. We were setting up a like a savings plan because she's already planned out in 6 years. She's taking her
I
sabbatical,
love it.
and
I
I
love
was
it.
like, yes,
Let's
I was
go.
so excited for her. But yeah, I don't want anybody getting caught up in numerical age here because as
Yes.
long as you are still here, there is still time.
Yes. Yes. And I think when we get caught up in that oh, it's too late, I feel like we rob ourselves of the joy we could experience, because it's
100%.
like, I mean, like you said, you're still here, I mean, and you're still worthy of experiencing joy, experiencing life. And it may, perhaps, there may be things that feel hard or new or scary, but imagine what you could feel, what you could
Yes.
experience.
Now, you were on your sabbatical for a year. You did return to work, but we'll just say like some of your goals or the way in which you wanted or were willing to work, that changed. Um, and you've mentioned your sabbatical coaching. That's what I want to know is like, how did we go from I took a sabbatical and now I want to coach you on your sabbatical?
Yeah, yeah, it's a good question. It really emerged from, I saw myself asking these questions about, kind of entering into the midlife, the 40s club, and feeling like, um there has to be more to life than this, but then also feeling like, there aren't really spaces to process things like career grief, to even really, there are few spaces where it's validated, where you're like, yeah, I want to take a year off, where people won't be like, oh my gosh, that's, no, you shouldn't do that, what about your career, those kind of things. And I started to notice that I had peers and other people that were asking those same types of questions, maybe not necessarily using that specific language, but voicing, even as I've been doing these freelance contracts, is seeing, folks and peers, we kind of keep ending up in these situations where it's like, wow, like, we're kind of feeling like pressed or pushed to the max. And so I wanted to create a space where, particularly folks from corporate and tech, could have a space where they could process these types of things and come back to themselves and come back into alignment with their values. Because I think, particularly in those industries, there is such an emphasis on a version of success that's, I'm climbing ladder, I'm hustling, I'm going up, I'm going up. And not everybody has that. That's not everybody's version of success, but you may feel pressured into it or even locked into it when you've experienced a version of that. And so how can I create a space where folks have the freedom and the support to honestly explore what they want from their lives and careers, um, instead of just continuing on default in a certain version of success that they don't really even want.
I agree with you on that. We had a question. How did you heal your nervous system from burnout? What were some of the things that you did or techniques you tried?
Yeah, I would say The biggest support is working. I had was working with like a somatic therapist. So she's still like a cognitive therapist, but she really is focused on somatics. And so
And
that
can you explain what somatics are?
Oh, yes, yes. So really focused on, so there are some forms of therapy that it's more just focused on kind of talk therapy, so sort of talking through your problems. Somatic therapy is really focused on understanding what you're feeling in your body, where trauma or stress is living in your body, and then how do you kind of safely and in a supportive environment with a practitioner, how do you gradually increase your capacity um, to essentially release that trauma in your body? And so that I would say is the most profound piece in terms of working with someone who is really trained in that and can really create a safe space to help you grow in your capacity for that. In terms of my personal practices, I really try to prioritize movement of some kind. So whether walking, lifting weights, yoga, dancing, some kind of movement, because that generally just helps me kind of release it out of my body. Um, and um, those would be, I think, the core things that I've done, and then also kind of linking into to breathing exercises, which I think are so simple, but are really so powerful in terms of just getting back into my body and being able to kind of release stress that's held up in there.
Okay, so we've talked a little bit about, you know, how the pandemic was sort of an impetus for a lot of us to reevaluate how we were living life, ask some important questions about like, is this really what I want? And those sort of things. And I mean, I guess for because I'm sure there's some folks here in the chat that are watching this video that probably took a sabbatical during that time. And I want to say it probably felt a little risky to do it then, given, all that was going on in the world. Fast forward to here we are in May of 2025. And it I mean, what can I say about where we are in the world right now? Um, but I would imagine that there may be some folks who are thinking, I need this, but how can I take off time in such a crazy point, a turbulent situation in our society? Um, and I'm curious as to what you think, like, is it too crazy right now? Or is it more, this is exactly the time that you should be taking a sabbatical?
Yes, I think it's the latter. And I don't, I'm not taking lightly that I think from 2020 to now things have only continued to escalate. The wildness has just escalated. Um but to me, right, if we think about 2020 and how that was such a clarifying moment for people, I think now it's even more so. How how do you clarify for yourself what is important to you? And maybe it is that job. I don't know. People have different values, so maybe it is genuinely. But if you're someone that you're feeling like, oh, I really need this, what I would offer is that, um, as we've talked about, like a sabbatical is not just a retreat or an escape. I think it's actually a portal for transformation. And I think we're in an era where we need people who are healed, who are grounded, who are connected to themselves, who are connected to their intuition. And I think a sabbatical, an intentional sabbatical, is such a powerful avenue for doing that. Um, and I can understand that there are real concerns, in terms of the state of the world. And I myself have been reflecting that as I'm working with clients and talking with people. And I think it's also an opportunity to uh, expand how we think about our resources, and how we think about what's important to us and what we value. And so that, even for me, that has been, because, there's sometimes where I'm like, wow, this is really wild. Like, is this really what I should be doing, in terms of, like, it feels risky to be, kind of get a business off the ground in the midst of all this happening. Yet, going back to what I mentioned of, hearing so many of my peers, even more so in the midst of what's going on, people are asking questions about, like, wanting meaning, wanting purpose, wanting to recenter what's important to them. And so I think that it's even more important in this such a chaotic time to really prioritize yourself and reconnect with your vision for life.
So if I'm asking myself some of those questions, but I'm also very anxious given the tariffs, given what that's doing to the stock market. And I'm like, my retirement looks like it's going up in flames. What are some practical tips, or like, how can I make this, if I want to take a sabbatical, how can I make this work when things feel very uncertain at the moment?
Yeah.
What are some things I could do?
Yeah. I I think the place to start is with what you can control and can know. And I feel like a great place to start, well, I would say in two things. One, I would say, create some space for yourself to dream and vision about your sabbatical. And the second thing that I would say is run the numbers. Like, start, like, get spreadsheet and run the numbers of, like, okay, if this is like what I'd want, maybe your dream kind of what would feel rest and rejuvenating. And actually, line by line, looking at the budget. And this is something that I've done with a couple of folks and my clients, because that starts to make it real. And then I think what sometimes people find is that it's like, oh, this amount is actually not as high as I thought it would be. Particularly if you start exploring options, and this can vary, in terms of what people have access to. But this is where I think of other resources we have. Like, if you have other community resources of, can you move in with friends or with family? That's not necessarily always available to people, but can you co-live with folks? Do you want to explore, potentially being in another country where the exchange rate of, assuming these are folks that are coming from the U.S., where the exchange rate of the dollar is different, right? So, grounding in actually understanding the numbers starts to make it real, and then also starts to give you the concrete number that if you're still in that job, that you can open up that a bank account that's dedicated to your sabbatical fund and start putting money, into it. So that's one, place that I would say to start. And then, for in terms of for Black women, I feel like Exodus Summit is such an amazing resource. What is it, 20,000 strong women, and
I think it's more than 25,000 at this point.
I mean, this is a wealth of resources and knowledge and community of if you are feeling overwhelmed, particularly in this time, of folks who will, if you're trying to figure out, well, I have kids or I have a house to sell, all these things. I at this point I guarantee there's someone in there who is in your situation or who has been who can give advice. So I think the so two things I would say is that that financial piece of really getting concrete about the numbers, and then two, access community, whether it's kind of direct community that you already know or like connecting into resources like Exodus Summit.
Okay. Um, I think a concern might be given the uncertainty, because we are living in a period of economic uncertainty, political uncertainty, like all kinds of uncertainty. Might be like, okay, I can I can move back in with my parents, or my sister has a spare room. I can sock away a little money, what have you. Maybe I can take 6 months instead of a year. But what about the sabbatical is over and I've got to find a job in this hot mess?
Yeah, yeah,
Any advice there?
yeah, and that's a very, very real concern that I hear, particularly in yeah, like in tech. For a couple of years, the market has been really tough, so I definitely hear that in terms of that concern. Um, what I would offer as well is that I'm big on like things don't have to be all or nothing, right? So I think also thinking about one. Um, what are ways that you can start giving yourself relief now, that don't necessarily, maybe it doesn't immediately mean leaving your job, but how can you start incorporating rest and rejuvenation into your existing rhythms? And the second piece I would say is also how can you do things like how can you be creative? If you're working a full-time job where like you have vacation days and things, how can you be creative and group your vacation days with kind of days that you already get off, so that you can kind of take a longer chunk off. So those are kind of two, starting to think about those things in terms of options that aren't necessarily immediately leaving your job. Um, and I think in the long term, um, I would also say, really, again, I go back to the community piece,
Mhm.
because in general, kind of as we're thinking about jobs, as we're thinking about career, it's kind of a cliche, but people always talk about, it's your network, but it really truly is, and even more so in a market where, there's just so many folks in the market. That's truly how I've gotten all of my roles or freelance contracts. It's been staying really and genuinely connected to the folks in my network. And so I would say it's also an investment to, and I don't mean like staying connected in a weird like, oh, I just want this job and da-da. But I mean like generally if there are people you resonate with, I professionally or personally, um, staying in connection with them, seeing how they are, linking up with them, and connecting with them before you're in the moment where you kind of need that support. So it's not leaning into this transactional thing. It's just that you have that connection already. You can be a source of support. So those are some of the ways that folks can lean into that. And I would also offer I offer a free resource, the Mosaic 31 Days of Reflection, which is an email series that if you're in a place where maybe right away you don't have the ability to take a long extended time off, but you still want to start doing this reflection work of understanding, how do I start to heal this career grief? how do I, move forward? It's really a resource created specifically for that. And so you could take, some of your vacation time and start moving through those reflection questions, and taking steps forward to get that rest and that break.
Okay. Okay. We have one other question. How do you balance resting during your sabbatical and planning what happens once the sabbatical ends, especially if you don't want to go back, but you can't retire?
I so appreciate this question because that's me. That's me. Um, I I gave myself a window of time during the year when I said, for X number of months, like I'm just going to let myself be. Particularly at the very beginning, because at the very beginning, um, I was just super exhausted, and it took like 2 months just to kind of get over, or detox from the whole experience. And but I did, again, like I kind of lightly stayed in touch with, again, people that I like in their life giving, and either former colleagues or other people, so that I was still kind of connected to those folks. And then I also kind of, once I got to a certain point, said, okay, this is going to kind of be the time when I start, more actively job searching. So that's one way I could offer in terms of, setting up your time, giving yourself permission to have time where you're not going to think about, the job search piece, and then another time where you're going to start transitioning yourself back into, that piece.
Okay. One more question. What is a good way to request a sabbatical from your employer, especially if the employer doesn't offer them, and you think they might not approve it?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I love that that question is even being asked, because it's like, hey, like if you don't ask, you never know.
Closed mouth don't get fed.
You never know. So I love that that question is being asked. I would um I would lean into resources that, because now there's actually more and more research of the benefit of sabbaticals. Um, I'll say that in terms of sabbaticals, I'm a fierce advocate of your sabbatical or career break is for you. It's not to make you more productive for your employer. But if you're in the case where you're trying to convince or persuade an employer of you taking the break, right, you have to know your audience. And, so then I think that does mean you're kind of making a case for like, hey, here's how I'm going to be, a better employee and more, productive. So there's a guy named DJ Dodonna, who did, kind of in-depth research on the impact of sabbaticals. And his whole thing is kind of making sabbaticals more accessible for everyone. So I think that's a great resource to reference in terms of, um, and it's in Harvard Business Review, of, using resources like that, kind of typically in corporate world, that it's like, oh, Harvard Business Review did it, to make that case. I would also say, in terms of your specific company, and you mentioned, you know feeling like maybe your manager won't approve. I'm curious if, and I don't know specific context, are there kind of other avenues that you can go through, that aren't your manager, that you can maybe kind of get soft approval or support from someone that has authority above your manager? That if you can kind of get them, this is kind of a tricky dance, because you don't necessarily want to be like, oh, I just went over you to talk to your boss, but this kind of soft influence of the, maybe your boss's boss, that can lean in and support, you in terms of making that request to your manager.
Okay. Well, I got nothing to add there because I have never worked in corporate and I don't think I would have done very well because it sounds like there's a lot of you got to say things a certain way and chain of command. None of that has ever been my strong suit. So I don't have anything to offer there. So remind me again about, or remind us, the Mosaic 31 days. I put the link in the description of this video. It's also in the chat. If somebody clicks that link, what are they signing up for?
Yeah. So to give more context on it, again, as I was seeing people wrestling with these questions, being in transition, I wanted to create a resource that kind of gently guided folks through this process. So it's a 31 days of emails. Each day is a really brief reflection with questions, and it's I framed it in the framework of the 5 stages of grief. And so with each week of the reflection emails, it's a different theme of those 5 stages. And it's a curation of some of my own poetry or words from other folks in terms of the brief reflection, and then questions that you can start just reflecting on. And it's really meant to be an avenue to help folks realign with their values, and to help folks grieve what they've experienced in their professional experiences, and give language to that. And as they give language to that, to kind of have clarity on next steps. And so I've had folks who have done that reflection and who have voiced that as they've started doing that work, it helps them clarify their values. And one person did actually end up exiting his job because he realized, oh wow, like my values are really different than what my job um, uh, is. So it's really meant to be an avenue for helping professionals return to themselves, just in that kind of slow journey of healing from career grief.
Okay, okay. Um, Now you have a workshop coming up in a little while. You have a workshop in July. What is that?
Yes.
What's going to go on with that?
Yes, yes. So coming back to the theme of intuition, because I've experienced how profound that is in terms of my journey. And I think even in terms of us being in such a chaotic, uncertain time, I think more than ever we need to be connected to our intuition, because I think the the foundation of the things that I think we've taken for granted, a lot of them are crumbling, right? Like but we could have a longer conversation about this. But a lot of things are very, very shaky in terms of the U.S. government, in terms of things we've taken for granted, at least from the U.S. side. And so, how can you access your inner wisdom? And so, the focus of this workshop is trusting your story. And it's a time where the intent is in an intimate community, 10 folks having time to reconnect with yourself, reflect back on your life and career story, to illuminate your values, to illuminate how you've kind of previously made decisions, so to really start giving you a more intuitive framework for decision making, and to also connect you into a community of folks where, if you're in that corporate job and everybody's still just like, everybody hates it, but like nobody's doing anything, but you want to be kind of with other people who,
That part.
yeah, who are asking, who are really, and I think it takes a lot of courage to like to ask those hard questions and to do that deeper work. And so it really is an intent to kind of help you connect into that framework, and to connect into a community there. So that'll be happening on July 19th. It's a virtual workshop, and you can find out more information about that at the workshop link.
Okay. And there is a link to that in the description of the video as well. All right, I got one last thing and then I'm going to let you go. What would you say is, I'm not going to ask the most important, but maybe one of the, oops, I've lost my questions here. Give me a second. Um, one of the underrated, often forgotten ways that Black women can, I'm trying to think of the word that I want to look here. Like, because we're basically talking about being able to live a life that you want in a way that you want. And often a sabbatical is kind of like the gateway to, getting off the hamster wheel and getting there. Is there something you think that we're kind of overlooking or is often overlooked or is underrated in that path, getting there to the ultimate dream of having this life that you love and that is fulfilling?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, and again, maybe I keep harping on it, but I'll say, I say really like reconnecting to your intuition and what I've started to think about as creating an intuition practice. And that's something, for me, it was kind of through my sabbatical, but your intuition is always with you, right? So it's not, so with that, I would offer, um, I, what are the different tools you can leverage for that? Like journaling. I love journaling because, um, you just need, a notebook or a document, and it's really accessible. Accessing journal prompts. Again, like, perhaps like with the one I offer, or there are a lot of different offerings in terms of that. Um, but taking time to slow down and journal or find other ways that you connect with your intuition. I think a lot of it is about um, reconnecting back to what helps you feel like you again. And
Okay.
that's different for different people. For some people
Yes.
it's like, oh, music. For some people it's dancing. For some people it's cooking. It's not cooking for me because I hate cooking. But you know, but
Okay.
the just taking that time to do that, it doesn't have to be an overwhelming thing, but just take intentional time to do what makes you feel like you, and don't wait. You don't need to wait. Take a sabbatical career break with your job now. um and the second thing I would say is take care of your body, because again, they these jobs will break your body. So even if if you need to start very simply and just say, you know what, I'm going to set a timer on the hour, and when that timer goes off, I'm going to drink a glass of water to stay hydrated. This is true story because I've had to do this. Because your body is, in my opinion, is your vessel for your intuition. And so how do you start, even in the smallest of ways, to care for your body? And then as you care for your body, you reconnect to your intuition, and that helps connect you to making the choices where you can live a life that you want.
Well said. Well said. Thank you for joining us tonight and sharing your experience and expertise. If you are watching this either now or in the future, hey, if you're watching it in the future and you want to connect with Nyam, the links to do so are in the description of the video. Um, and like I said, I didn't do this on purpose, but we've got a sabbatical career break theme this week. I will be live on Thursday with the guest that was supposed to be here last Tuesday, but there was a mix up. So she will be here and discuss her career break as well as how she transitioned afterwards. So I hope y'all can join me then as well. Thank y'all all for coming to hang out tonight, and I will see y'all on Thursday.